Good evening, students. I wanted to go ahead and go over the prompt and show you some key elements when you're preparing over the weekend for this assessment. The first thing I want to make very clear is that this is a business presentation. You can teach us something, you can sell us something, or if there's something within a business situation that's informative or persuasive, it's fair game. When we talk about decreasing semantic noise, we're talking about words that may be unfamiliar to your audience. To that effect, you'll have some informative elements, even to a persuasive speech. So we all begin on the same playing field. Vivid examples in stories are also highly effective when it comes to persuading or informing your audience. Sometimes your challenge is to persuade your audience that there is a problem that needs to be resolved. And oftentimes that means you need to provide the terms and educate them. Stats are also highly effective. You can do this through quotations or bar graphs, pie charts, etc. There are a myriad of examples of past exemplary case studies of speeches in this class, in past classes, and I'll provide them for this class on Blackboard. Make sure that you review these examples when you're working on the presentation. And below, I have videos and podcasts that will explain not only the lecture material as far as how to craft the speech and the layout and so forth and persuasive elements, but also obviously this specific video on how to actually kind of process through the assignment sheet grading rubric. Now make sure that you understand it's very important to have two tabs open when you're presenting, when you're working on your presentation. One tab should be an exemplary case study of a past student work as a sample layout. It's especially effective for visual learners. But also you should have then, of course, your secondary tab, which is the outline you're working on. Note that all of the outlines I provide are not perfect. Things change and shift each semester, especially with the online learning. So when we're in class or when we're in our individual instructor workshop or student workshop, make sure you have a pen and paper handy so that you can write down any specific items for this semester. Most of those I'll go over. I don't think there will be any aberrations outside of this, but I want to just have a caveat in case there's some, well, I guess the point is not all of the sample outlines are going to cover exactly what I'm talking about, but for the most part, they're 95% on the money. When you're researching your speech, don't just take the first couple articles you find. Make sure your research is recent. If it's a current events topic, it should be from this year. If it's something highly controversial, preferably it should be from this month. Your research should have highly credible sources, and you're going to state their credibility in your speech. You're literally going to type it out in the speech, not a parenthetical citation, not some sort of footnote, because your audience members do not have a copy of your speech, of your full sentence outline. When you organize the structure, make sure that you understand the various organizational patterns, which I cover in the video blogs as well as the audio podcasts. You're going to have a draft. Oftentimes, I've been doing this for over 30 years. I've given probably up to 1,000 speeches. I always make changes in my speech, sometimes in real time while I'm speaking, sometimes right before I get up. Why do I have that flexibility and ability to do that? Because I do my research and I play with my organizational patterns. Why oftentimes are my speeches a slam dunk? Because I practice them, and then when I present them, I have a lot of flexibility as far as shifting arguments in real time, which you won't necessarily have to do, but you will have a Q&A session. So the more you practice and organize and research, you'll nail your Q&A. And sometimes I've noticed that's where my students really shine. Now make sure that you have an understanding of the organizational patterns from the lecture. Own your own delivery style. My style tends to be very aggressive from my trade and debate. Sometimes actually I'm very chill and funny and people love to see that we switch it up. You should also make sure your delivery style reflects your personality, but sometimes it's an issue of tone. So if you're talking about something very serious, you really don't want to have a skippy, pithy, puppies and rainbow persona. You want to have a serious persona in your speech. But sometimes you can soften that with your personality. Now, how do I make sure that I get your personality? That's you not reading that speech to your colleagues. It's not story time. It's a delivery of a speech presentation, which means you're not reading your outline. Can you use your outline and read your quotes? Dang tootin', but I don't want people sitting in front of the camera. Quite frankly, you're gonna be standing up. You're not gonna be sitting at a computer, because I've noticed over the pandemic, people just read to me, and that is not at all to your benefit to become a master Coppola killer shark cub. The supporting material should come from reliable, credible sources. You should cite the author's name, their credibility, and the date, and make sure that you're locating the credibility of those authors while you're doing your presentation. When you're doing this, I would always recommend a brain dump. That means you can get out a piece of paper and write a bunch of ideas visually. That means some of my students, I don't know how they do this, they'll do a stream of consciousness, where they'll literally get out a bunch of notebook paper and just like literally sometimes write the whole speech out in paragraph format, which is not the end result game, but it's very viable as a technique for a brain dump. Other people like to work on a PowerPoint because they're highly visual. Some people like to type in keywords and then build around that. Whatever your style is, own it and do a brain dump first. Be mindful once again of the credentials of your sources. You don't want to be called a hack. In the real world, I always state my source credentials, and it's really a game changer in some instances, because I mean, you can't argue with someone who's highly credible in whatever the field of expertise that I'm covering in my speech. Make sure, now we may do a class survey result. I have to see if we have time in the summer, so kind of keep that as a caveat. These are the options you have for a sales speech: a topical, a problem solution, and a Monroe. And that's all covered in my lectures down here on the last page, in these podcast links, video links, and so forth. So I'm not going to be redundant and go over that. The other thing is, make sure that you understand this can be your best friend or your worst enemy if you don't follow the instructions from my video blog, because it could go very, very wrong quick, and I'm not going to elaborate because that's all covered in the video. Do not attempt this organizational structure until you have reviewed that lecture material. And this was back in the day when it was a bricks and mortar situation, but now you've got the video. And unequivocally, 10 out of 10 students last semester, and I'm always shocked, I did not like this organizational pattern when I was a student, because I was a champion competitor that always used this. And this drove me bonkers. I was so mad at my professor. But once I started teaching, I really liked it. And I never used to use it for my intro classes. And then suddenly I started doing it for not just my advanced public speaking, but my public speaking, round one course. And students love it. Even my introduction to 1311 students love the Monroe. If you like to put a circle in a circle, or a square in a square, this is the organizational pattern for you. But make sure you follow the instructions, and every step must be covered. These are the evaluating criteria of your assignment. You're going to attend a private conference, or it might be a group situation with other students during office hours. Also, you're going to meet the rough dead outline. Everybody has a rough draft outline deadline on the same day, so it's fair. So day one speakers have the same deadline as the last day speakers. If you have a perception that you are shy or have speech anxiety, I would strongly urge you to go on day one. And if you're not prepared, you need to be very honest with me as we get close to this deadline, because I have noticed in my 30 years of teaching, the people who go on the last day, in probably 70% of the cases, literally waited to the last minute, and it's painfully clears the class. And it's very disrespectful to the students who worked on their assignment very early on and presented early on. So if you have any reticence about the assignment, knock it out. Make sure that you have your full sentence outline. That's what I mean. What is this? Written documentation. So written documentation to me is the full sentence outline. And then, this is kind of redundant. I probably should fix this somehow, but written documentation is a full sentence outline. Your research, I used to require the articles a long time ago, but now I don't. So your works cited list. So kind of think of these two as the full sentence outline and the works cited list. You're going to have some sort of multimedia component, whether it's a PowerPoint, I do not recommend Keynote at all. It's always a disaster, especially if you're working on a different computer in the real world and presenting somewhere. And every time I warn colleagues, don't use Keynote. They don't listen to me. They're at a professional conference and the fonts are all wonky, cattywampus, all whack, because they did not listen to LMC and they should have used PowerPoint and know the version. This is your fail safe. That's your fail-safe trapdoor. And when I use the word trapdoor, it's a positive thing, like you're getting out of trouble, not that you're falling into trouble. This is your trapdoor escape scenario because you can access this anywhere. You're going to have a question answer period and you're going to be asking and answering questions, and peer critiques are very important. I actually became a better speaker once I started doing peer critiques. Those are generally 5 bulleted points per colleague. And we may just do that in the chat now versus emailing, which I used to do. And I think that would be good because people can get an idea and get some ideas from other colleagues on what a good critique looks like. The speaker orders, we're going to sign up. I always let people go on the day that they want to go. So for example, you may notice first speaker talks about the importance of drinking water. You may want to give your speech as the second speaker on vegetarianism because there's continuity in the type of topic. Sometimes we'll have a real, like I call them Debbie Downer speeches, which are highly important and very depressing, but they're very inspirational. And then suddenly we'll get like a let's go work out speech. And so it's kind of a nice, like you're going up and down in the class from highly emotional to kind of fun. And so it just kind of, I like people to feel out and feel what they feel intuitively is the best time for them to speak. I don't like to lock people in, but don't make it a situation where there's a painful wait. And this usually happens on the last day. And I tell students, it's not a firing squad, it's a speech. And so you should be ready at any given moment to give your speech. And that should be any situation in the real world. Your final draft, full sentence outline and works cited list should be sent on the day of your presentation prior to class. It should be in my inbox right before class in PDF format, and there's the email. Recognize that you're expected to perform on that day. We really don't have time over the summer to keep moving things back. If you want to dress up, I always award 3 points. If you have, let's say you're doing a Boston Red Sox speech and you want to do a wardrobe modification aligned with your topic, it's plus 3 points. And then I'll talk about some more examples. The speech is 5 to 7 minutes. If it's 4.5 minutes, it's minus 5 points. If it's 9 minutes and you didn't time it, it's abundantly clear. It's the first time you ever look at the speech, and I can always tell when someone did not rehearse it. That would be, if it's 9 points, it would be 5 points per 30 seconds. You can do the math. That's not my skill set. However, if you know your speech is 9 minutes because you've practiced it 5 times and you tell me, you may have the 9 minutes as long as you tell me. And then of course there's going to be a 2-minute Q&A, and those are often very fun. I was never good at questions and answers when I was a debater. I really wasn't. But now that I'm in politics, there's this thing called questions from the press and public where you get to ask elected officials, and I got really good to the point where they eliminated it over the pandemic. And I worked so hard for the Charter Review Commission, which is like the constitutional convention of a municipal government. And now they're going to require it of every board meeting. So that was like a major win for transparency, something I've been working on. Why? Because I was the only speaker of any citizen in this huge town of San Marcos to show up every Monday at 5 o'clock online on Zoom, giving a speech, asking for it. And they listened to me, and now it's going to be voted on. It's going to be an elected item on a ballot. That's the power that one person has by writing a well-rehearsed speech. So just saying. Speaking notes, I don't care what you use. Some colleagues will say you must use note cards. Others will say you must use your full sentence outline PDF that you're giving me and print it out. You do whatever you desire. All right, I would recommend a printed out outline. That's what I use. I've never been good at note cards. However, I have students who have been very good that would put me to shame with their use of note cards. So you do what you feel comfortable. I always recommend practicing it at least 15 times. Make sure you follow guidelines as far as things like vocal variety, volume, rate of speed, those sorts of things. The speech always begins the moment you walk up to the podium or you begin. Like when you're getting ready, you're already on. I mean, you are the center of attention. So own that. Do not start the speech. This drives me crazy when people say, "Hi, today I'm going to talk about the importance of gluten-free diet." And I'm like, why did you just do that? The attention getter is where you begin the speech, where you tell me the story of how you suffered from migraines and so forth as a result of eating a highly glutinous diet. That's the attention getter, not your sidebar chatter. And it lowers your credibility in my mind. Do not be overly reliant on the speaking notes. Do not read to me. Make sure you're using good eye contact. And it's always clear to the classroom who has practiced and who just threw it together. And I don't want you to have to go through that experience of embarrassing yourself because you were not prepared. And quite frankly, this is a great class. A shout out to all future classes from now to the end of time. Capoletta's Killer Shark Cubs of summer of 2021, 10:30, 9:50 class are the boom diggity boom. Just saying. Awesome. One of the coolest classes I've ever had. And we're only in I think today was day one. Today was day one, and I'm already loving this class. Now I've blown my cover. So hand gestures should be natural. Some of us use much more. You know what? I need to start using my hand gestures. In the classroom, if y'all saw me in the classroom, I walk all over the room. I'm Sicilian, right? So I'm half Polish, half Sicilian. I use these huge hand gestures, and I'm almost ashamed of myself because you can't see me on Zoom. So you can't see me moving my hands. Maybe I should move my desk back or my chair back or something, whatever. Don't use monotone delivery, vocal variety. And also, if you are prone to doing ums or or that kind of thing, work on your vocal variety. Work on your breath control. Do movement. That will eliminate that situation. I was in a department and one person was saying every 5 minutes, and I record my speeches and critique myself. And I went back and I was like, whoa, LMC, you're saying every 5 seconds. This is not good. And I broke myself of it just to say, you're working on my vocal variety, my rate of speed. The visual aid is required. Make sure you use the rule of 6, which means no more than 6 bulleted points, and each bulleted point should be no more than 6 elements. It doesn't need to be this huge visual aid. Sometimes a word cloud or a photo is much more effective. Why do you think you don't want to have something like this on a PowerPoint? That's right. Your audience is going to be reading it, and you're simply going to be reading to them. Visual aid, this rule is only, quite frankly, if you're going to have something that would be a trigger alert. I don't watch violent movies. Some of my students have been in war zones or been victims of violent crime. I don't want that to trigger my class. Or if there's something gory, like if it's a drunk driving speech, I don't want to see the car wrapped. I don't want to see the body, right? I mean, maybe the car, but I don't need, or like a pet speech, like animal cruelty. I don't need to see, and I've stopped speeches on many occasions throughout my career as a professor with people who did not follow my instructions on an animal cruelty speech, wanting me to see the chicken without a beak. I don't want to see that. Well, first of all, in that instance, I've been a vegetarian for 33, 34 years, so I know the argument, and I don't want to look at it. And moreover, to me, it's more effective talking about it, telling me a story. It's just going to piss me off, quite frankly, and that's one of the few things that really probably except for complete rudeness, that upset me as a professor is having to endure graphic violence because a student blanked out my specific instructions that I make a conscious decision as an individual not to watch graphic violence. I've never watched a horror movie. I don't want to see it on your screen. So that's the end of my soapbox rant. And your video should be no more than 30 seconds. And don't, if you have a 4.5 minute speech, don't expect your video really shouldn't. I mean, I guess it could, but don't, if your speech is going to be 4 minutes, don't show me a minute video. Let's put it that way. Okay. So, and then make sure you know how to share a video on Zoom and the audio. Don't waste our time fiddling around, learning how to do a screen share and learning how to share the audio while you're in my class. You should have figured that out before you can create your own Zoom meeting and practice it. You're going to turn in a full sentence outline, works cited list, and then you're going to complete one instructor conference. For my Zoom classes, make sure that you email your instructor on that day of class. That'd be me, right? Immediately class. Don't go, well, I emailed you my final outline 2 weeks ago and you approved it. You said it was perfect. Well, you know what? I get a lot of emails and I file emails as soon as I get done with them. And I want to make sure I have the most accurate, up-to-date outline. And I strongly encourage students to always make changes. If you are reading, if you are practicing from a hard copy and you make notes, just keep the notes on the outline. Don't practice from a computer screen if you're going to use a hard copy paper. Always practice don't practice from the computer if you're going to use note cards. Practice from what you're going to actually use in that situation. And then make sure it's not a topic outline, which is like a couple of keywords, or an essay that will begin with a C. You probably end up failing the assignment. And remember, you're going to have full sentences that are tags or sound bites, which succinctly in one sentence give the overarching argument to your audience. Don't say blue. Well, I don't know what that means. If you could say blue is the most beautiful color in the world, that would be a tag. Okay, and then you would give subpoint A, blue makes people happy. B, blue is like the sky and we love nature. Whatever you're going to do, make sure it's a full sentence. If you have a Roman numeral 2, let's say you have Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2, if there's an A, you must have a B. Don't just have Roman numeral 1, A, and no B. Okay, they need to be in pairs. You don't want your subpoints to be lonely. These are the elements of an introduction with the exception of the Monroe motivated sequence. That's like the I before E except after C. These are the elements of the conclusion with the exception of the motivated sequence, Monroe sequence. And make sure that you follow those instructions. Signposts and transitions. Signposts are when you say my first argument is, my second issue is, my third point is. Transitions are, now that we've talked about the beautiful color forest green, let's now move to fuchsia, right? You're transitioning. All outlines must be pre-approved by the instructor by the workshop deadline. All students will have the same deadline. I've already said that above. And the highest grade you can make is a 70 if you don't turn in your outline by the day. Here's how your speech should be. Literally, you're going to type this up. Dr. Brown, a PhD in biology, currently teaching at Harvard University, states in 2003 that blam. It literally is typed up like that. So these are the elements you're going to have. And I would, for a virtual environment, this and the quote needs to be highlighted in whatever color that you find visually acceptable, maybe a light yellow or a light green, a light blue, something light. And don't do it dark red. I can't read it. I'm 53 years old and that's just too much for me, for my eyes. All of this should be done on the day of the presentation. It's -5 points if I get just a list of links and not a full bibliography or works cited list. Each student will submit a critique for each student who presents. Comments should be specific. Don't repeat the same comments for every speaker. This is back when we would do it in the class. It was like Valentine's Day. Remember when you would put like, there'd be like a bunch of little bags across the blackboard and people would drop in each little lunch sack of Valentine. And so people would leave my class with like a stack of 30 cool handwritten notes. Now we're in COVID, we're afraid of everybody's cooties. So we do it through Zoom chat. Make sure that there's at least 5 comments. Here are some things for you to think about. And then this is your go-to, this and this. If you want to listen to the podcast, if you're going for the Monroe, I would definitely recommend that you go for this. If you're going to do problem solution, definitely go for this as well as this. It's in podcast format. Thank you for watching my video. I'm really amped about this class. And cut.